Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, The Intelligence Layer, Running Your Organization in the Age of AI. My name is Erica Goldwater, and I am on the Spark marketing team, and I am joined here by Derek Perry, CTO of Spark, and Josh Scott, who is the Senior Director of Solutions Consulting. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Good to be here.
Wonderful. So let's dive in. Today, we're talking about the intelligence layer and running your organization in the age of AI. What does that mean? I think before we dive into this, what we need to talk about is where have we been? Let's talk about the build versus buy and the build versus buy trap. So, okay, historically, organizations have had two paths. You either buy SaaS or you build it. How'd we get here? How did that work out? Let's start with you, Derek.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and Josh and I were having some dialogue earlier this week talking about how we ended up in this state, and to get to how we ended up where we are today, we need to go back. And as we look at the history of packaged software all the way into SaaS, and we're really going to take a 20-year journey. If we look back at packaged software that organizations bought, it was because it wasn't feasible, or the cost with building custom from the ground up was just too much to bear for an organization. So they adopted technologies off the shelf, things like ERP. As we geared up to Y2K, it retired risk in an organization. It also meant an organization had less flexibility to be unique to their business processes, the things that truly drove differentiation or competition became things that they had to shake out of the business because these systems were set up such that you needed to adopt their process. And that really continued as we saw the emergence of SaaS in the 2010s and the real explosion of SaaS. It's great from an operating cost standpoint, right? You can get rid of the large scale capital investments up front. You can also benefit from the enhancements or the additional features or functions that are built into these platforms. But it has the same challenges with regard to a business's ability to be flexible. It didn't start at ground zero. You were working in an ecosystem, a package. There were modules, but those modules were all opinionated. It didn't unlock what we're really seeing in the age of AI around personalized software. We're avoiding some of the rigid workflows. We're really driving that uniqueness and interesting element back into the business. And Josh and I were talking about bananas as an example, right? And it sounds a little strange, so bear with me. When you look at bananas and the history of bananas, there's only one type of banana grown, and that type is a Cavendish banana. And it is this monoculture of process. And that's what we saw for things like managing inventory in an organization or managing how they intake customers. It became this monoculture, this boring usage of off-the-shelf software because the age of AI was not upon us, and you didn't have the ability to build that custom software.
Derek, I think I would be remiss if I didn't say that's bananas. That is bananas.
Nicely done.
But I think the key word there is rigid. What we're seeing in the market is a choice between rigidity and innovation. And I think everybody wants to trend towards innovation, but the cost of innovation has been high. One of the benefits that we're finding at Spark is the time to value of innovation now has changed. Because of AI tooling, we're able to iterate through ideas much faster. And so where before you could choose scale or personalization, now you can really get the best of both worlds. You can get excellent time to value, and instead of just driving innovation and personalization, AI allows us to drive insights that really allow us to customize our software, not just for our businesses, but for our customers, individual customers inside our businesses. And that change is transformative.
Yeah, I think building on that, when we look at this dichotomy of build versus buy, people chose to build because they had that flexibility. They could build in things that were unique to them. But it also meant it took longer to do. An organization was then in the business of owning a piece of software, and the care and feeding and all the maintenance and upgrades and the never-ending march of security challenges that you may encounter in owning your own destiny and building from the ground up. It also meant higher costs. All of that drove organizations to change their processes, to have the tail wag the dog, so to speak, around choosing this buy path and being by default. And we don't think that there's anything wrong with a buy path. We advise our clients all the time on the best solution. The best solution is the one that fits the unique business needs of the organization. It is not necessarily a 100% buy or 100% build. And Josh can maybe speak a little bit more around what we see in this mode of building on top of things that you have custom systems or SaaS systems within your ecosystem.
Right. Josh, can you talk about that and sort of so teams don't have to be stuck between rigidity and, reinvention? They don't. What are the options today that you're seeing?
No, yeah, I think that's a great point, Derek. I think one of the things we've found is that terms are really being redefined. In other words, it used to be brownfield, you're updating or modernizing something, or greenfield, something brand new. And I would say almost everything that we work on at Spark, even things that would be traditionally classified greenfield, that are kind of a sky's the limit build, even those applications are really a mixture of both. And what happens is we really try to understand what's critical about the business processes that the software that our clients are using, what's the part that needs to stay. And so what we find is that there are models that allow us to keep key parts of existing applications where it isn't an all or nothing approach. We're able to have a nuanced approach to this problem. And I'm thinking about a client that Derek and I actually were on site with late last year. And we were sitting in the room they had brought stakeholders in from all over the United States, different parts of the business. And Derek and I did what we often do, which is just ask questions, really, really trying to understand. What they were looking to do was to build a specific inspection tool for a piece of their business. But as we began to understand better what the problem was, there was data that was never going to leave certain systems. It was not an option to migrate that data into a wholly new system. They needed to be able to retain access to their SaaS, some of their SaaS platforms, while still building this wholly new reimagined workflow. We call this process re-engineering because it involves both understanding the core business processes that drive software and at the same time understanding what's possible now with the ever-evolving technology landscape that we find ourselves in. And so at the end of the day, what we were able to do is leverage both what was good about their existing systems, while at the same time build something new on top that had access and knowledge of all of those existing systems. So they didn't lose what they loved about what was, and yet they gained important functionality that will drive their business into the next phase of success.
And I think that's why we think of it as a buy versus build trap. You can spend a lot of time and effort between this false dichotomy of I need to buy or I need to build. And the answer often is in the middle of those. It's not starting with zero. We believe in our business that Starting with zero is a non-starter, especially in the age of AI, when we look at the currency of structure and speed and governance and driving user behaviors and being flexible and adaptable as being key. One thing that we see in that space is, well, people love a bargain. And when we get involved and we talk about how we're going to solve a problem, because that's what it is. It's not a buy or build. It's how do we solve the problem? I often have heard lately, I really like our platform, our SaaS or our custom or our packaged software has served the needs of the business, but we pay for 100% of that when we use 4% at the end of the day. So the incremental adjustments in new modules or new features are great. An organization gets that for free in a SaaS world. But ultimately, are they adopting? Are they using those? Are those creating net new organizational value? Are they giving them business agility? We find the answer is often no.
So, yeah, what
Go
do you
ahead,
do
Erica.
then? No. Sorry, I'm just it's so interested in this. So, what do you do then when you're trying to solve for a problem? They know they have one. They have some solutions. A little bit of combination of build versus buy. What is the solution in the age of AI? What do you recommend?
I think one key part of that answer, and I'll let Derek continue to kind of continue this answer, but you mentioned the word speed, Derek. I think that speed is one of the things we often say, a lot of companies are talking about AI as if it's a silver bullet. And while AI does transform what's possible, it isn't a one size fits all solution for everything. But the one thing that it universally drives that changes this equation is speed. The ability to iterate on a much quicker basis. We find ourselves now talking to our delivery colleagues about new ways of even imagining sprints, like in a typical agile terms. We're iterating in days rather than weeks. And this changes the fundamental calculus of this decision algorithm. Instead of something taking years or at least months to create, we're able to begin to understand what value they need and even very, very early on in the process, be able to visualize what it is they need. And then our development teams are able to iterate so much more quickly to drive that personalized, business specific application. And I think that while it isn't the entire answer, I think speed is one of the things that really has changed the calculus for us.
I think building on that, we often want to start and understand the problem from first principles. We want to understand and appreciate the scenario that we're walking into, the stakeholders, their positions. We want to truly unbundle the problem or the opportunity from a solution. And when we're able to understand the solution, we can contextualize that then with all that data, the problem, the people, the organizational process, the organizational structure. So all those are ways that we help inform how we can drive that speed in the right direction. We talk about AI. AI can drive you incredibly fast. It's up to you whether you're staying on the road or you're going off the cliff. We'd argue you can frankly get off track more quickly in the age of AI. So predicating your whole solution on that problem, on the constraints that you see, on the organizational investments that have been made for 20 or 30 years in these platforms that run your business, is really how we shape these solutions. And that's really where we see this buy build breakdown, right? Buy build, yes. Custom, yes. SaaS, yes. Packaged software, yes. All of those things are realities in the age of AI.
So, would it be fair to say that maybe the problem isn't build versus buy or how you deliver it, but it's understanding or reframing the reframing it to begin with, the
Yeah,
challenge to begin with. And I think we have a lot to talk about in that regard too.
Yeah, I think people love to get to the solution, and I'm certainly guilty of this in my career, is not understanding and appreciating the problem fully before we start talking about a solution. And that does give us a little bit of a segue here as we look at how we deliver for our clients and what our clients expect in the market is that we can come and we can not spend 60 to 70% of the beginning of an engagement by building scaffolding, scaling up. We know that we must start with that head start. We can't start it at ground zero. And that's why we've made investments in our business around productized solutions, foundations, ways of adopting that delivery cadence that AI has unlocked, the risk reduction that we see, the need and the intense focus on driving impact.
So I think at Spark we call this hybrid engineering, correct? I mean, can we talk a little bit about what this truly means and how people are leveraging it? And you mentioned a head start. I think that's something that everyone would say, yes, I appreciate a head start. Nobody wants to start from scratch anymore. There's no time for that, right? So can you explain a little bit about what we mean by hybrid engineering?
Yeah, Josh, how many times have you built the same APIs, platforms, scaffolding in your career?
Oh, countless times. I used to keep a file of things that I would copy and paste over so that I wouldn't have to build that same part again and I would be able to do the part that matters the most. The thing I want to emphasize before we talk about hybrid engineering is while, intelligent foundations, accelerators, the use of AI, et cetera, they transform what's possible. I do want to just emphasize this is still built on highly intelligent engineers. The hybrid engineering is built on the foundation of what Spark has done well for, well over a decade. And so I want to talk as we talk about hybrid engineering, we're going to talk about a lot of cool things, but the thing that's the coolest about Spark engineering is our people. But the neat thing that what Derek and I get to work with every day is we have a very curious group of engineers, a curious group of builders that are always looking at how we can do something better. And kind of our philosophy around hybrid engineering really comes from them. It's not thought up in a lab or, it's not just a great idea we had. These are best practices that we've begun to execute with our clients based on the successful outcomes that we've driven. And I think the first one really is intelligent foundations. It's Derek was saying, not starting with zero. I think a better jumping off point for projects is something that really differentiates Spark. And we're going to talk about some of those specific accelerators, but we're going to talk about 3 of them today and in the course of this series. But this is an ever-growing toolbox of things that we're finding that help our teams start projects faster. Derek, do you want to talk a little bit about governance?
Sure. Yeah, and building on Josh's answer, right? When we think of engineers or builders is our language for our team. The best compliment you can give many engineers is that they're lazy, right? And that doesn't sound like a compliment in the world of
It's a little counterintuitive.
it is, and with the advances in AI and patterning and not starting at zero, we're able to focus our time and attention and value creation on those unique activities, the things you haven't done 1,000 times before. And I think one of the areas that we're seeing that evolution from lazy, because lazy as an engineer or builder is table stakes now. AI can generate it for you. We see the need to be intellectually curious, to look around corners, to consider circumstances, or to build empathy and sit in somebody else's chair, sit and critique your approach from various perspectives. So I think that's a key element of what we bring to bear in this hybrid engineering approach. When we look at governance, governance is incredibly important. We talked about AI being very fast. It can drive you off the cliff, right? It can also drive you to great value extremely quickly in an organization. We think that setting up those guardrails, setting up the design space that you can iterate and work in, and setting constraints is absolutely critical.
Well, how about when we're talking about this new model and hybrid engineering, you're starting from a smarter base, essentially. What's the most exciting thing about that? You mentioned, accelerating, the starting point. How's that so valuable? Why is that so valuable, rather, to clients?
I can take that. I think going back to the example that I was talking about earlier, I think that the very first starting place is something that's been important to Spark since our inception. And that's what Monty, our founder, called really taking time to behold the problem, to really respect and understand the problem that our clients have. And I think the guardrails that Derek was talking about are formed by understanding the value that's trying to be driven. In other words, we can go as fast as AI will allow us to go, but to Derek's point, without those guardrails, we may not be going where we need to go. And so I think the very first foundation piece is we really try to demonstrate from the very first time we have a conversation with a client that we want to understand what both drives their business and what's keeping their business from growing. And by understanding those two metrics, we're able to begin to build those guardrails that are going to help us as we move forward. But adding to that, like we've been talking about, this smarter starting place, built upon that desire to drive towards outcomes, like holding ourselves accountable, having skin in the game, that's first. But on top of that, there's a technological layer of accelerators, best practices, experience that we bring to bear in every single project. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of those specific accelerators, but just broadly, what we're looking to do is that copy and paste that I was telling Derek I had to do before. I don't ever want a developer to have to do that again. I want, in the age of AI, the execution is more commoditized than is the ideation and problem solving. And so we want to make sure that the table stakes execution of our projects is accelerated in such a way that what our clients pay us for is the ideation and problem solving, the application on top of that starting place. And what that practically, one of the things that's always been frustrating to me as a consultant is there's always this weird phase at the beginning of a project where nothing happens. Nothing visibly changes. And we go sprint after sprint, demo after demo, and we can talk about the wiring we've done, the foundations we've done, the tests and the wiring that we put together to make it possible to eventually demonstrate value. What we at Spark want to do is eliminate as much as possible that phase. We want to begin to demonstrate value as close to day one as possible.
So you're accelerating that value.
Yep.
from the start. Sorry, Derek, I'll let you go in one sec. So this is a perfect segue to talk about what we've just launched as Intelligence Studio, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Erica. I think when you look at this hybrid engineering in practice, let's unbundle that. What does that actually mean? And I'll speak in an example, and then we can dig into the language. We, in those cases where Josh spoke about, have this period at the beginning of an engagement, or when you're building your own platform, you have this period where you have a lot of ideation. You don't have a lot of pen to paper. You can't see, you can't feel, it's not tactile at that point. By using Intelligence Studio and hybrid engineering, we're driving to a model where we are demoing interactive demos live, full code within 2 days. We have people in the experience, in the platform, truly mind blowing in terms of the speed of delivery. And that's because we've factored in these repeatable patterns. We've abstracted those and built those into offerings within Intelligence Studio. And that is really the secret sauce of how you go from a world where custom is way too expensive, it takes too long, and SaaS is too rigid, too limiting for your business, to this model where you apply the right intelligence in the right areas using pre-built packages or patterns that we have built over our 15 years as a company to deliver that value density very quickly. We need people to see and experience. And it takes the means of taking in a wide variety of information. Data is cheap in the age of AI. Insights are cheaper than they once were. The ability to take all of those insights and distill them down into action is really what we find is more challenging in that environment. So those are some of the ways when we look at Intelligence Studio and why we've invested in it. It's to ensure that our clients can see and experience what we're solving for them, the challenge, in a period of days or a week, not sprints or quarters or years.
And Derek, I just want to double click on something that you said, because I think that people might think that you misspoke. You talked about my team is deeply involved in this kind of understanding and application of Intelligence Studio early on, even in the pre-sales cycle. You said that within days, we're showing clients demos specific to their problem. You meant in days, right?
I did. Yeah. And I live in an HOA community, and we have a client in the HOA software space. And with them, there's a very complex system of regulatory requirements and state laws and a lot of background on how you can validate and vet modifications to your home. We went in, we understood the complicated information domain that is all of these legal restrictions, all of these policies and procedures that are in a whole pile of PDFs and paper documents. And we're able to drive that to a demo that you could experience and configure and drive to a stronger definition of scope. It became tactile for them at that point, which is a great way for us to demonstrate this Intelligence Studio in practice.
So you packaged up all those learnings over the years, all those areas that you know that your clients are typically stuck in with the HOA example. You've solved for that already. So already there's something to see. We've already jumped the hurdle there.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I think we think of it as a platform to drive these innovations, to drive this speed to market, as opposed to just taking on a project where we're starting at ground zero.
Right. So you look at all the patterns essentially of the challenges over the years that people are experiencing, and that's where the true value comes in, and you're applying your own intelligence and experience and able to build, a smarter starting point. Mm-hmm. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. Maybe, Erica, this would be a good time to talk about some of those specific accelerators that we've been hinting at since we got started. I'm actually going to start at the right and work left, because I think Assert IQ is a great story, and it really is built on the exact case that you were talking about, Erica, and that is like putting into practice things that we've learned. And one of the things that Derek and I both are software developers by trade, and there's a weird dichotomy about roles inside of software development. And you have a product owner or a scrum master who builds out stories for developers to create or to execute against. And there are acceptance criteria that say this is what it's going to look like when it's done. Assert IQ takes those acceptance criteria and makes them behind the scenes into test automation scripts that allow the developer to again have a smarter starting point for his or her work, where the work that they're doing, the coding that they're doing can be automatically tested against acceptance criteria that has been created by a product owner who never wrote a line of code. And then it allows our talent and QA engineers to then spend more time not on these table stakes kind of tests that are essential for the success of a project, but it allows them to spend time on just the more in-depth tests that ensure that an application will scale. Derek, do you want to talk about Ask IQ?
Sure. Yeah. I think when we spoke earlier about piles of data and even piles of insights, it's challenging to route people to the right space to go satisfy their asks, their needs. When you have a report dashboard that has 500 reports in it and growing every month, that becomes an information indexing challenge. You know what question to ask? You don't know where to get that information. We built ask.iq to satisfy that need, to really reverse it such that you can ask the question. You don't need to index in where does all that data live. It is making your data conversational. The nice thing with that, and the thing I use it personally for a lot, is to then drill down further and even to ask the question of what questions should I be asking of this data set, or what does this imply, and what actions can I drive organizationally based upon this information? So it's not only helping you get to the data, helping you understand the data, but it's also geared towards helping you drive action out of that data.
Another way to jumpstart sort of the learning and leveraging the data that's already available to you, right?
Not doing the things that we've done 1,000 times over and building that into a repeatable pattern that we can then go and deploy. And we can really focus on the needs of the user, right? What are their true asks of that information? I don't want to wire up a large database or even a data warehouse, and I don't want to acquire data. I really want to answer the user's question.
Yep.
And then what about Verify IQ? That's the third accelerator in this platform, correct?
Yep. This is one of the funnest stories. This came out of a use case where we were processing banking documents, because data sometimes is as simple as a piece of paper. It isn't always embedded and hidden in some system. Sometimes it's a paper laying on your desk that has to be ingested. And in the banking space, there's tons of that. But the one thing about banking documents is they tend to be very predictable and pristine. We've done a lot of work in the TLNM space, and bills of lading are probably as close to the exact opposite as possible. And so what my team did is took as a challenge to see if we could use the same kind of AI tooling that we were using for banking documents for literally stained and scribbled on bills of lading documents. And what we found is the technology works exactly the same. We're able to take these principles, and build out a model that identifies anomalies, that looks for things specific to the kind of data being ingested. And again, it's just a better place to start. Every one of these will be customized for our clients, but it just provides a better way to start a project.
And I think one of the interesting things about Verify in the original banking use case, and there are dozens of use cases that this solution applies in, was that one of the key things that we found as we interrogated that problem was missing pages. If you're going to get a mortgage, you have to submit a lot of documentation. You have to submit a bank statement, a W-2, and inevitably 20 other pieces of information. As people scan that information or process it or download it, occasionally they miss a page.
Sure.
And that ends up holding up a closing and impacting a transaction. So when we looked at the original use case around Verify, it was, well, can we just make sure all the pages are here? Can we detect missing pages? And then we said, great, we could do that. That's a pretty easy problem, right? Somebody could flip through and they could do that manually. But then how do we substantiate deposits? If somebody gets a $40,000 deposit the month before they go and take a mortgage out, well, we need to substantiate the source of that income or at least get a justification. Can we detect those things without having to have a human make all those determinations? It was a way of allowing those humans to focus on work that's much more engaging for them than flipping through 500 pages of financial documents to see if a page got missed.
Amazing. Amazing. So Intelligence Studio isn't just a solution. It's really sort of understanding that it's the hybrid engineering applied to the problems that you're seeing today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's looking at those common patterns that we've solved over and over and over and building around those so we can deploy this for a client and we don't have to spend all the time wiring up a intelligent document processing. We're really focused on why are we using it, not how are we using it.
Yep.
Amazing. So I was remiss in when I introduced the webinar to begin with that this was the introductory sort of webinar to introduce this topic of Spark Intelligence Studio, and then we're going to have 3 other future episodes as we dig a little deeper into the solutions: Ask IQ, Assert IQ, and Verify IQ. But before we wrap up, guys, what would you say? Let's just think about the future. What if organizations are not rethinking things like this and rethinking sort of hybrid engineering and thinking in that way? What happens if they stay in that sort of rigid solution, build versus buy and not evolve to the hybrid engineering sort of thought process? What would you say?
Yeah, I think that what happens if you don't question, right? And we have clients across a continuum. Some clients are highly AI adoptive. They're accelerating workflows. They're seeing a lot of net impact in their business. We have other clients that are slower in their journey, perhaps more burdened by regulations or restrictions from a data perspective. I view this on a gradient. So you're not all in, you're not all out in terms of the buy build continuum. Well, you're the same way with regard to how you deploy AI within your environment for benefit. So we're often engaging and we're building use cases. We're doing enablement work to set up the foundation for our clients to adopt AI into their ways of working, to avoid the buy build trap, or even to find little areas in the organization that they can squeeze value out of. It brings up one interesting discussion we had, and it was around trash cans.
Trash cans?
Trash cans. So
Okay.
you're at a stadium and you're walking around. You buy a hot dog. I have 3 kids, so I'm buying a lot of hot dog. You walk by a trash can, you throw your trash in it. It's overflowing. Trash is coming out. Well, that's a poor experience for all parties, and it creates more work for maintenance. So in this case, they have set up a camera to detect those trash cans. When they get to 75% full, they automatically dispatch somebody to go and clean out that trash can, as an example. So I think there are little use cases in organizations that don't mean you have to adopt AI across every element of your business. You can find these little areas that create value that ultimately help build the case and are the kindling for the larger engagements that you'll go and drive a lot of value in the business.
I think the one thing I would add to that may be slightly more provocative is Derek is absolutely right that we see clients across a continuum, and while we see the value of these practices, everyone isn't going to just take our word for it. But I think the challenge for industry is to realize what you're missing if you don't.
Mm-hmm.
I think I want to go back to something I said earlier, which was, the whole area of re-engineering. One of the most exciting parts of my job is knowing what's possible. And I work with a ton of smart people that are always telling me things that I didn't know was possible. So I have a growing repository of things that are possible. And I think when you apply what's possible to problems that businesses have struggled with, the outcomes are different and better than they could have ever expected. And so I think while we're seeing our clients be on this continuum that Derek talked about, I think that the exciting thing about doing what we do today is we're able to drive value and solve problems in ways that were really impossible. I mean, having a camera intelligently look at a trash can and dispatch someone to make sure that that trash can is empty for Derek and his 3 kids, that's awesome. And one of the things that and I'll just say this in closing as a starting place, one of the things I'll often ask as just a question to get started is, what is something that you or your team wish you never had to do again? And that is often something that AI can take care of. And I'll close with one example. We have a client who was responsible for building custom conveyor belts. And we did a pilot with that client. And the specifications were so technical that an engineer had to review every order. And the backlog of order review was weeks and months in length. So the experience for this company's clients was not ideal. We went in, trained a model to look at those orders like an engineer would look at them. We for sure still had a human in the loop to provide final checkoff, etc. But we reduced that process by about 95% from a time perspective.
Wow.
And what it enabled those engineers that no longer had to review orders to do was to go do things that only engineers could do. And that's what's exciting for us. We're freeing people from those tasks that AI can do to enable them to do tasks that humans can do so much better.
Wow, that's a great way to sum it up. We're rethinking what's possible, and really, again, it's kind of that smarter starting point that accelerates everything, which I suppose is why you named it these accelerators.
Yep.
Genius. Oh, guys, thank you so much for walking through this concept and talking about the intelligence layer. And obviously, this webinar was entitled Running Your Organization in the Age of AI, and how Spark is helping clients do this. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain all of this. And then I know our attendees will be looking forward to the next series as we talk about, each of the solutions and the accelerators in a little more depth and how they may be able to leverage them in their organizations today. So thank you for joining us, and thanks for watching, everyone. Stay tuned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.